We find that banks choose an intermediate degree of opacity. So they choose to provide their investors with some information, but not with too much. Since the financial crisis, one thing that became very apparent is that bank balance sheets are very complex, highly interconnected, and opaque. In consequence, investors have a very hard time assessing the health of their own financial institution because it depends heavily on the health of other intermediaries that it's exposed to. That means when banks are choosing their exposures in the first place, they in fact realize that they are creating more opaque portfolios, which then affects the information that their investors have, it affects their decisions, and then feeds back into bank profits. If you ask bankers, they're going to argue that these complex derivatives as well as interconnected exposures is designed to improve risk sharing, to eliminate risk, and to enhance diversification. So in this paper, we take a very different view, and we ask whether opacity can in fact be an intentional choice of banks. We find that it's actually a choice of banks who want to balance the amount of information that their investors receive. Banks want to maximize their profits by offering low rate of return and avoiding default as much as possible. However, there is a tension here. If investors have too much information, they're going to demand high rates of return from the banks. On the other hand, if they have very little information and bank portfolio is very opaque, they're going to be very nervous and run on banks very often, which also destroys profits of the banks. So they choose to provide their investors with some information, but not with too much. Another finding is that banks in fact can choose to expose themselves to runs because that's how they can offer investors a very low rate of return when they actually not default. In other words, banks maximize their profits by exposing the whole financial sector, including themselves, to more financial fragility. Our paper suggests that the next time we hear about banks being opaque, we need to bear in mind that at least part of it is a strategic decision of banks.